Good evening. Thank you for joining us tonight for our June action meeting. Please join us in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right. Again, thank you everyone for joining us this evening. I'm going to turn it over to Mrs. Sugars to start with roll call.
Mrs. Arroyo?
Here.
Ms. Friedel?
Here.
Mr. Goodwin?
Here.
Mrs. Matlack?
Here.
Mrs. Neary?
Here.
Mr. Avadia?
Here.
Mrs. Schultz?
Here.
Mrs. Tong?
Here.
Mrs. Seidel?
Here. Okay, our first item of business tonight is approval of minutes. We're looking for approval of our board work session special action meeting minutes and executive session minutes dated May 12th, 2020, and our regular meeting minutes and executive session minutes dated May 26th, 2020. Lori, could I have a second?
I second.
Thank you. Any questions or changes? Okay, seeing none, Mrs. Sugars.
Okay, I'm going to open up the voting so board members can cast their votes. Oh, it helps if I press the button. There we go. Open online voting. There we go.
Okay. And I believe we'll have two board members that will need to do a voice vote.
So I have everybody, but Mrs. Tong, are you able to cast your vote or do you need to do it verbally?
I need to do verbally. I'm not able to see that cast of the vote being cast. So
Okay.
I'll say yes to it.
Okay. So we have 8 yes votes and 1 abstention.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, next I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Malash. We had some recognition to share this evening.
Thank you, Mrs. Seidel. I'm very excited about the recognition that we are doing this evening. We are recognizing one of our high school coaches, and we are recognizing a number of students for their success at the Coryell Science Fair. So we are going to start with Coach Anita Bowser, and she is the head girls swim coach at Cherry Hill High School East, and she was recognized as the Coach of the Year for the South Jersey Swimming Association. So just some success and some highlights from this year. Cherry Hill East completed a storybook season by handing Bridgewater Raritan its first loss in 4 years to take the Public A Championship and complete an undefeated season. The Cougars proved they were the best team in the state following a season where they beat both the Public B and Public C champions. Cherry Hill High School East had both a deep collection of center lane talent and the depth to compete on the outside to form a true juggernaut in the water. So these are some of the highlights. 2019-2020 undefeated South Jersey Group A champions, the NJ.com Swim Team of the Year, and finished ranked #1 in New Jersey with a 14-0 record. That was the Cherry Hill High School East girls swim team. Incredible accomplishments. For Coach Bowser, she has been 19 years as the head girls swim coach at High School East. 6-time South Jersey Section A champions, including the last 4 in a row. The last 4 in a row. 10-time SJISL Conference champion, 5-time South Jersey Invitational Open champion, 5-time individual state champions, and 3 relay team state championships. Not only is Coach Bowser an incredible and storied success as a coach, she also is a graduate of Cherry Hill High School East, where she was a 4-year varsity swimmer for the Cougars. She swam collegiately at Towson University, and she finished her career at Rowan University, where she obtained her degree in health and physical education. So we do have a certificate for Coach Bowser, which I will send out to her. So congratulations to Coach Bowser for her leadership in the High School East Girls Swim Team.
Woohoo!
Great, yes, right? Good stuff, right? So hopefully she is watching. Well done. We are thrilled that
Great
she is
job,
with us.
congratulations.
And next, I'm really excited to talk a little bit about our 2020 Coryell Science Fair winners. So we have students who were recognized from Cherry Hill High School West, Cherry Hill High School East, one student from Beck Middle School, and 3 students who did a team project from Rosa International Middle School. I also have certificates for all of these students, and we will mail them out to their houses. I'd like to start first with the student from Beck Middle School, Aniket Chintapalli. Aniket took 3rd place in microbiology for 6th grade this year. So congratulations, Aniket. And then at Rosa International Middle School, a threesome, Arman Gupta, Jia Gupta, and Karina Gupta. And they received 1st place team projects for the 8th grade. 1st place, all the middle school students, 8th graders at Rosa Middle School. So congratulations to the Gupta students.
Hello.
And then for our high school students at Cherry Hill High School East, Ray Sharma, 1st place, behavioral science, 11th and 12th grade. Fox Chang, 2nd place, behavioral science, 9th and 10th grade. Yarden Yanuskevich, 3rd place, behavioral science, 9th and 10th grade. Riva Sharma, 1st place, engineering, 9th and 10th grade. Jazz Chang, 1st place, environmental science, 9th and 10th grade. Rami Awad, 2nd place, medicine and health, 9th and 10th grade. And Antonio Ferraro, 3rd place, medicine and health, 9th and 10th grade. And then the students from Cherry Hill High School West, Aiden Garber, 1st place, behavioral and social science, 9th and 10th grade. Ethan Bovell, 2nd place, biochemistry, 9th and 10th grade. Ian Sachs, 1st place, chemistry, 11th and 12th grade. Gabby Hugel, 1st place, computer science, 11th and 12th grade. Samantha Lafferty, 1st place, medicine and health, 11th and 12th grade. Eliana Birnbaum, 3rd place, medicine and health, 11th and 12th grade. Jewel Labletta, 1st place, medicine and health, 9th and 10th grade. Kiana Amora, 1st place, microbiology, 11th and 12th grade. And Samara Pritchett, 1st place, microbiology, 9th and 10th grade. Congratulations to all of these students from Beck Middle School, Rosa Middle School, High School East, and High School West. Cherry Hill School District was incredibly well represented at the Coryell Science Fair. And again, the majority of these projects are done, there's a combination of some work that's done in school. A lot of the work is done outside the regular class time. So special thanks to the teachers and advisors who worked with these students, to the parents for the time and support that they provided, and a special thank you to all of the students for their hard work. And and their dedication that brought them these awards. So congratulations to all of them.
That's awesome.
Woohoo.
A big night for awards.
Yeah,
Right?
it was. Thank you. So now we are moving into correspondence, and I'll go around and ask our board members if they have anything to share. I'll start with Mr. Avadia.
Nothing, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Goodwin? Mrs. Matlack?
Hi, I attended 2 meetings this month since our last meeting. Camden County School Boards Association meeting was held on June 11th at 7 p.m. It was a virtual meeting. The guest speaker was Assemblywoman Pam Lampett, and she spoke about some legislation that she is putting forward. Let's see, there's no central portal to coordinate free and reduced lunch and SNAP programs. She's putting forth legislation for that. Legislation for mental health regarding screenings being done at doctors' offices yearly for children. And then some bills regarding feeding of our students over the summer, lunch programs over the summer. She was asked some questions, and she didn't have a whole, of course the questions had to do with, budget, state budget. The Jonathan Pushman, who is the governmental relations representative from New Jersey School Boards Association, asked her if she could, be an advocate for pushing up the August 25th date in order to let us know our budgets sooner so that we can more adequately plan for the upcoming school year. And he did say to her, good or bad, we want to know what it is we're dealing with. She was amenable to moving that point forward on behalf of the School Boards Association. There were many things that were talked about. Some of them, are probably now updated. As we know, things change by the minute at sometimes over these past few months. Those were some of the key things. She was asked, about what she thought reopening would look like. She did not know. She gave some guesses, but I won't share them because they were just that. They were just guesses on her part. Let's see. I did also attend another meeting. The New Jersey School Boards Association County Leadership Meeting, which was held on June 15th at 3 p.m. Larry Feinsod spoke about, he talked about the Lee Group giving their report to the governor. And the Lee Group, Lee stands for Leadership in Educational Excellence. And it is the major educational organizations in the state comprise this group, and they've given, and New Jersey School Boards is also a part of that group. They've given their recommendations to the governor. He cited, several key points. There were many key points. I'll summarize just a few of them. The key points for the governor about reopening schools. Public health is the most important aspect. The health and safety of our staff and students is the most important aspect that the report cited. Cited the unique and complex setting of the school environment, funding resources needed to provide for the public health, the digital divide that exists in some school districts throughout the state. The report also asked for an interim commissioner to be put into place because of all the things that we're dealing with in the state at this point. Talked about staffing, talks about transportation and the possible issues that districts will face in these areas. There was concern about, when, if, how we open up, and what possible closures, when, if those may occur. Special ed students were cited in the report as a huge concern, with the online learning that has been going on and in the future, and how to adequately meet their needs. And it was also discussed about social emotional learning of our students as we move forward. So all of that was in a report that was given to the governor. At that meeting, which was on June 15th, Larry Feinsod said that they had hoped to hear from the governor some guidelines on reopening by the end of that week, and of course we are past that, and we have not heard. So that's about all I have for that. Those are the two meetings. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mrs. Matlock. Mr. Goodwin, do you have anything to share?
No, I don't have any items.
Okay, Ms. Friedel?
None for me, thank you.
Okay, Mrs. Schultz?
None for me, thank you.
Mrs. Neary?
None for me.
Mrs. Arroyo?
I don't have any, well, I didn't attend any meetings. I did just want to give my accolades to the students from Cherry Hill High School East that put together that amazing peaceful protest, and how they reached out to adults in the community to work with them to put it together. I think that was phenomenal, and I look forward to seeing a lot more of their voices at the table. So, thank you.
Thank you. Mrs. Tong?
Nope, nothing for me, thank you.
Okay. And I'll just add one item. I did have the opportunity to sit in on both High School West and High School East virtual graduation. And I have to say that I was blown away by how incredible, how meaningful, how well done the ceremonies were. I'm not sure what I was expecting in light of the pandemic, but I was so impressed, and they were both beautiful ceremonies, and I hope they were as meaningful to the parents and students that graduated, but they were really well done. So thank you to the administration, the staff, and to the production companies that created those events. All right, next, I believe, Ms. Sugars, are you going to read or Dr. Malash, are you going to read from our students?
Dr. Smith is actually checking on the reports for me right now.
Okay, so should we move into public comment and then we'll come back to that?
Yes.
Okay, so we are going to move into our first public comment. There will be two opportunities for public comment this evening. The first public comment session is for agenda items only. There'll be another public comment section for any topic at the end of the meeting. As we've done for the past few months, we've asked people to submit their comments in writing. Still have a few minutes to submit to lshugars@chclc.org. Mrs. Sugars, do you have any public comments for the first comment period tonight?
I do, actually, I have quite a few.
Okay.
The first one is from Jen Nadia, 224 North Madison Avenue. Good evening. On the agenda for action, BOE meeting for Tuesday, June 23rd, 2020, under the BNF section 15.4. Our two vestibules at Man and Barton for a total of $1.8 million. At the last BOE meeting, the district administration announced it would not be moving forward with projects at several schools due to the reduced state aid. Instead of addressing notable projects through the district like windows that leak and ADA compliance project, the district administration is choosing more vestibules. Personally, don't agree with the administration's use of funds when we have very specific health and safety concerns throughout the district and our buildings that need to be fixed. Please vote no to BNF 15.4 and find projects that could improve our students' experience in our school buildings.
Thank you, Mrs. Nadia.
Next one is from Beth Becker, 17 Dunbarton Road. I'm concerned about the spending on vestibules when we do not know what restrictions we will have and adjustments we will have to make in the fall. The money being voted on to install vestibules tonight may be needed for extra buses or overtime for teachers or trailers to spread out classes or a myriad of other adjustments we can't fathom right now. Spending money at this point is irresponsible.
Thank you, Mrs. Becker.
I have a statement here from Steve Redfern, President of the Cherry Hill Education Association. Good evening, Mrs. Seidel, Dr. Malash, and Mrs. Sugars. I want to take a moment to thank Mrs. Seidel, the members of the Cherry Hill BOE negotiation team, Dr. Malash, Ms. Adrian, and Mrs. Sugars for their commitment to continue contract negotiations with CHEA during these unprecedented times. I appreciate the continued work of both sides to foster positive and productive conversations. This will be the second consecutive collective bargaining agreement to be ratified before June 30th. The willingness to listen and work together shows how true collaboration can benefit the entire school community. Thank you again for your commitment to our CHEA members and to the Cherry Hill School District. Be well and have a great summer. Sincerely, Steve Redfern, CHEA President.
Thank you, Mr. Redfern.
Susan Druckenbrod, 162 Valley Run Drive. I urge the board to vote no on spending almost $2 million on security vestibules for Barton and Marion. Vestibules are too costly. Why do other towns spend significantly less on their vestibules? The vestibules will not keep out armed attackers who want entry to the schools. Let's put this money towards air conditioning, roof repairs, towards playground improvements. These improvements will enhance the buildings and the educational opportunities for our kids. These 50-year-old buildings have many needs. They do not need vestibules that will only provide a false sense of security.
Thank you, Mrs. Druckenbrod.
Jeff Potowitz, 110 Kilburn Drive, Cherry Hill, New Jersey. Agenda item 15.3, transfer of capital outlay capital projects. Motion to approve the transfer of funds not to exceed $5 million to fund pre-development and other costs associated with architects, lawyers, and construction matters for school facilities projects. Such transfer funds may be reimbursed. In effect, the reimbursement may come from the issue of tax-free bonds. Please be more specific as to whom this $5 million will be spent and given. Will the school board vote on how and to whom individual portions of the $5 million will be spent?
Thank you, Dr. Potowitz.
Rick Short. Dear Cherry Hill School Board members, please vote no tonight and request the district to resize to a smaller vestibule design and not build the current gymnasium-sized security vestibules. These are my questions below. Before the Cherry Hill Public Schools wasted an estimated $1 million to $1.2 million in building school vestibules in the wrong type schools in the middle of a COVID pandemic. Why does every Cherry Hill school vestibule keep costing so much compared to Maple Shade School average cost of $150,000 to build a vestibule in Washington Township, average vestibule cost of $288,000 to build. Now Cherry Hill's new vestibule average cost is now $939,000, and that's $6,500 and $1,000 higher than our neighboring school vestibule costs. Question 2, with a new construction cost at $300 per square foot, why is the vestibule construction square foot size of the average cost so high? For $939,000, you should be able to build a 3,100 square foot building, which is almost the size of a gymnasium. Are we building a gym-sized security vestibule? Question 3, what Cherry Hill security expert is recommending installing a vestibule in Beck and then skipping installing 2 vestibules in middle schools Rosa and Carusi before installing more vestibules in elementary schools as proposed? Question 4, dear Cherry Hill School Board members, do you know what school is more of a threat? Is it a New Jersey middle school or a New Jersey elementary school? I hope you know this answer. Question 5, why are you spending a cent before knowing your COVID class education restart costs? You could possibly need extra $21 million, possibly $12 million, extra bus costs, and possibly $9 million in trailer rental costs. It's my opinion that if you all vote yes, you are wasting $1 million to $1.2 million of Cherry Hill taxpayers' money, and the voters will remember this when the Cherry Hill Bond 2021 does a retry. It's your job as school board to offer the best possible physical security for middle school students first, and the best possible health protection in the middle school of a pandemic. These vestibules fail on all sides and should be voted down. I would suggest you ask the district to go back to the drawing board and install Rosa and Carusi vestibules first at a future date and save Cherry Hill Township taxpayers over $1 million. Please vote no. Thank you. Also, to make Cherry Hill Elementary security vestibules more affordable in the future. You will need to add the main office with vestibules right outside the front door, which can also be called building outward on new ground. This will save Cherry Hill taxpayers millions of dollars like Maple Shade and Washington Township did 2 years ago. Remember, it's your right as a school board member to raise your hand and ask the following questions to your fellow board members right now with all my questions above.
Thank you, Mr. Short.
Lindy Rosen, 6 Fairhaven Court, asked for a no vote for the vestibules.
Thank you, Mrs. Rosen.
And that is all for agenda public comment.
Okay, thank you. Okay, do we have student representative reports?
We do not.
Okay.
If they come through, we will address them later in the
Okay.
evening. If not, we'll do them on July 14th.
Okay, so next I'll turn it over to you, Dr. Malash, for the superintendent's comments.
Thank you, Mrs. Seidel. So you mentioned before in your correspondence comments about the graduation ceremonies. So 1 week ago, we held the first virtual graduation ceremonies for our high school students, and they were led off on Monday of last week, a little more than a week ago, by the 3 virtual graduation ceremonies for our middle school students. This is the first time that we've ever done virtual graduation ceremonies, and certainly they were necessitated by our situation of school buildings being closed because of the pandemic. I'm incredibly grateful to the work that went into the ceremonies. I hope that folks had a chance to watch each of them, to watch the 3 middle schools, to watch the 2 high schools, to see what took place. A great deal of work from the staff at the schools, individual staff members, the administrative teams at the high school levels, the building principals, Dr. Smith, Barbara Wilson, our public information officer, working with Coryell Productions and the students and staff members who appeared. I think they did a fantastic job. I think the personality that the schools wanted to portray definitely came through. They are all available. We have the special section on our website. If you just type in www.chclc.org/wegraduate, you can see that. It's also on the front of our page through the slideshow that's there. There's a lot of information. The senior shout outs that our PTA secured, the high school level, those are all on there, which was a really neat idea. And they did a great job. We have said all along, since we were initially closed in March and knew that we would be closed for an extended period of time, that we would celebrate the class of 2020, that we would recognize these students for their accomplishments at each of the different levels, and even honestly down into the 5th grade. There were a number of virtual 5th grade ceremonies that took place, and a lot of work went into preparing those and to planning those. So please make sure you take a look at them. Visit our website, visit our YouTube channel. They are on there. You can listen to the messages the students conveyed in their speeches, and just some fantastic ceremonies that took place. And just like that, last week, the 2019-2020 academic year ended. 182 days of school for our students, 187 days of school for our certificated staff. The last 3.5 months, which were certainly different than what we had expected when we went into this academic year. Again, I want to offer my sincere thanks to our staff members, the nearly 1,700 employees that we have in this school district, the cleaners and custodians, the maintenance and ground staff that we have, all of the support staff, all of the certificated staff, the administrative staff, all of the people that work in the business office and the HR office. These 1,700 employees, each of them doing their jobs throughout the academic year, allow us to provide the education that we provide for 11,000 students on a daily basis. So I'm very grateful to all of the work that goes into it. And again, over the course of the last 3.5 months, to our students, to our families, for their continued dedication to make sure that they got as much as they possibly could out of the education that existed. Unfortunately, as we sit today on the 23rd of June, Mrs. Matlack talked about the meeting, where Assemblywoman Lampett was involved. Assemblywoman Lampett doesn't have concrete answers, and we still do not have concrete answers about what it's going to look like in September. We know that our extended school year program that we run each year will run this year. It is being done virtually. We have been challenged as local school districts to receive concrete information from the Department of Ed and from the state of New Jersey about what's permissible, what's not permissible, from the Department of Health about what it means to be healthy. How do we test for that? How do we measure for that? What's our level of responsibility, to go through? And we have a very distinct level of responsibility for these children that attend our schools and for our staff members that are here. So our ESY, as letters went out to confirm with families, will remain virtual for this summer. We do have two committees that have been meeting regularly since May. We have a return to work committee and a return to school committee. These committees are both doing distinct work. The return to work committee is taking a look at what does it physically mean to return to work for us to bring our 12-month employees back on a daily basis, for us to bring our 10-month employees back when the students return. What needs to be done within our schools? What does it mean to be safe? And our return to school committee that's looking at the educational side, the academic side. What do we need to do? First, what needs to be done during the course of this summer? And then what does September look like? Children will return to education in September, and we are planning for three different pieces. One, that students are able to return to our building and that staff is able to return to our building in a full day schedule. We're preparing for students and staff to remain completely remote, where we will not be in school on a daily basis and things will still be done with remote learning opportunities. And then looking at a hybrid where students spend some time in school and some time at home. We're in the same situation that every other school district in the state of New Jersey is in. We keep hearing that the guidelines will be coming out soon. Soon, is a relative term. There have been some additional guidelines that have come out about, post secondary education at the collegiate level, what that looks like. We are still waiting for more firm guidelines for what it looks like within the school district. As of right now, we are planning for those three different options. Let me tell you, give some specific report outs about what is going on with those committees. First, the return to school committee. Dr. Mahan, who's our director of curriculum, she is overseeing and chairing the return to school committee. And Dr. Mahan shared this report. As we continue to navigate the impacts of COVID-19, I'm pleased to inform you that the return to school committee has been working diligently to prepare tentative recommendations based on the governor's guidelines for reopening. A few key points about the committee. The committee is divided right now into two groups. There's a core committee with each level represented in co-chairs and administrators, including people services. That's made up of 19 members. Then there are subcommittees that are representing each level, pre-K and elementary, middle, high school, and then people services that involves 35 additional members, staff members from our district. There have been weekly meetings that have taken place since early in May. Subcommittee meets on a weekly basis, and the core committees and subcommittees meet with Dr. Mahan and identify specific level questions and clarifications. To date, they've addressed the following topics: the in-service day that took place last Wednesday, June 17th for our staff, the flex option, the additional in-service day that took place on June 18th, which was last Thursday, summer learning resources for students, which have been shared on our website and are available at the district website and building websites, summer professional development list of PD offerings that we're providing for staff, looking at what it looks like to teach in a remote situation, as well as additional professional learning in collaboration with the return to work co-chairs. Future topics that are continuing to be addressed: the September 3rd and 4th, 2020 in-service days, new staff orientation that takes place over 4 days in August and early in September, and then the return to school definitive recommendations, which will be based on the guidance from the governor, the New Jersey Department of Education, and the CDC. These include curricular changes and adaptations, scheduling of students, addressing field trips and what can go on in school and outside of school, assessments, how do we assess where students are, how do we address assessments moving forward, classroom layouts, and et cetera. And again, we are expecting additional guidance from the state of New Jersey this week. Then we also have the return to work committee that is meeting, which is made up of 22 team members. To date, there has been 14 meetings. They've crafted a return to work recommendations for 11 to 12-month employees for both the individual buildings. And at the individual buildings, those are cleaners, custodians, secretaries, and building-based administrators, as well as central administration, which involves transportation office, the human resources office, the business office, the director of operations office, as well as buildings and grounds. Looking at recommendations for a September return, what does it mean for the school operations? They've almost completed. I've looked, we've gone through some draft recommendations so far. Just an idea, we are charting all of those out for what needs to take place. What does it look like, schools, district level, in terms of what is going through, defining protocols for implementation and support for the recommendations. And the committee will continue to meet weekly and will do so probably throughout the summer. They are volunteer committees that are made up of staff members. We do have community members that are involved. We invited representatives from Cherry Hill Special Ed PTA as well as Cherry Hill Zone PTA to participate in the return to school committee to represent the parent voice and the parent perspective. We'll continue to provide updates. Ideally, as soon as they provide some formal recommendations to me as superintendent, I will then present them to the board. We'll have discussion. We'll start to be able to share stuff publicly that we'll put on our website. So a lot that's been going on parallel to the end of the academic year. There is summer curriculum work that's going on. You'll see some of that in the C&I section of the agenda this evening. We also had an additional posting that went out as we do a comprehensive review of our curriculum, taking a specific look of how Black history is included, looking specifically of subject and content information, ancillary and support materials, the frequency of information that's included in the curriculum that's there. Also, we'll be able to look through that lens of white privilege and white fragility to have an understanding of what that looks like so that we can continue to round out the curriculum that we have. That ties directly into some of the work that's been done. And I have some special kudos for members of our staff and students in our community. As most folks in the community are aware, there was a march that was organized last Friday by students from the African American Culture Club at High School East. March that started at the shopping center at Ellsberg and marched down to the library. I was honored they invited me to speak. I participated in the march, opportunity to speak, as well as a number of students. Dr. Perry from High School East spoke as well, and we addressed some items. My comments are listed or can be found on our website. I'm not going to rehash all of them right now. But one of the biggest things that we need to continue to talk about as a school district is what does it mean to be anti-racist? What steps do we take? What does it mean to truly state, believe, and endorse the fact that Black lives matter? What does that mean for our students, for our families, and for our community members? How do we address curriculum? What does it mean in addressing that curriculum? What's the content of our curricula? What courses do we require students to take? There will be ongoing discussion about this in our community. I will continue to provide updates, to the Board of Education. I expect on a meeting by meeting basis, as well as in sharing information. Dr. Mahan and Mr. Guy, who is the principal at Rosa Middle School and one of the co-chairs of our Cultural Proficiency, Equity, and Character Education Committee, along with you, Mrs. Seidel, we participated in a panel discussion sponsored by the Cherry Hill African American Civic Association a week ago on Sunday, so the 14th of June. I also participated in one on the 7th of June, as well with community members. There will be another one this Sunday at 3 p.m. Where Mrs. Seidel, myself, Mr. Guy, Dr. Mahan, Barbara Moore-Williams, who's a consultant that we work with, will also participate, addressing and answering some questions, having a discussion about the experience of Black students in our school districts with what we are doing. So some very powerful discussions, some very important discussions. We have a responsibility as a school district to continue to advance the discussion and make sure that all of our staff members and all of our students feel that they are a part of what goes on, that their voices are heard, and that we are appropriately reflecting in our curriculum and in the work that we do. So I'm very excited and very encouraged by the voices that we have heard with what has gone on up to this point. I expect there will continue to be a great deal that will take place in our community and within our school district. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so with that, we'll move into our action agenda and we'll start with curriculum and instruction. The superintendent recommends and I move the following. Number 1, approval of attendance at conferences and workshops for the 2020-2021 school year. Number 2, approval of professional service agreements for the 2020-2021 school year. Do I have a second, Mrs. Matlack?
Yes, I second that.
Thank you. Mrs. Matlack, do you have any questions?
No, no questions. Thank you.
Okay. Mrs. Tong, any questions?
No questions, thank you, Lisa.
Okay. Mrs. Arroyo?
No, thank you.
Mrs. Neary?
None for me, thank you.
Mrs. Schultz?
No questions, thank you.
Ms. Friedel?
No questions, thank you.
Mr. Goodwin?
No questions, thank you.
And Mr. Avadia?
No questions, thank you.
Okay, thank you. So with that, Mrs. Sugars?
I'm going to open the online voting. And we have a unanimous vote.
Thank you. We'll now move into business and facilities. The superintendent recommends, and I move the following. Number 1, financial reports. Number 2, resolution approving a services agreement between the board and New Road Construction Management Company for the provision of construction management services. Number 3, transfer of capital outlay to capital projects. Number 4, approve use of capital reserve to fund approved projects for the 2020-2021 school year, security vestibules at Mann and Barton Elementary Schools. Number 5, rescission of award. Number 6, resolution for the award of change orders. Number 7, approval of Cherry Hill McKinney-Vento DCPMP students going out of district for the 2019-2020 school year. And number 8, acceptance of donations. Mrs. Schultz, do I have a second?
Yes, I second.
Thank you. Dr. Malash or Mrs. Sugars, before I call for a vote or ask for questions, do either of you have anything you'd like to address regarding any of these items?
Yes.
Okay.
I'm going to ask Mrs. Sugars is going to talk a little bit about the projects, go over with the board. If you remember, for the board members and for folks that may be watching online, but for the board members, this is a continuation of the discussion that took place at the board meeting from the agenda, from the special action agenda on June the 9th, regarding money from our surplus, the movement of the money, why the money was being moved, and then after the money, the board voted to move the initial monies. The board then requested, all 8 of the people that were on the board meeting requested that we identify additional projects to be done. So I'm going to ask Mr. Sugars to talk about what that means, why we're moving the money, what that money goes into, and the difference between capital projects, that can be done, what the board's role is, as well as versus maintenance and that kind of stuff.
So after we had our discussions at the last board meeting, we decided to look at some additional projects that we could do. And we chose projects that, were already part of our long-range facilities plan and were already part of the last bond referendum. And we decided to move ahead with 2 additional security vestibules. Part of the rationale for that is, again, we have a commitment to complete our security suite work. We're already working on doing swipe card access and cameras in all of our buildings because we will have some Alyssa's Law money that will help us fund that project. So we felt that continuing with security vestibules was a natural progression. Also in this environment of wanting to make sure we're limiting access to the buildings, who's coming into the buildings, trying to deal with issues at the front of the building rather than allowing, trying to kind of, monitor the traffic that comes into the building on a daily basis. So that's why we chose those 2 projects. We're tucking that money away. We're getting it out of our capital reserve accounts. If you recall, in 2010, we discussed this last week, when the state came in and was making cuts, they were looking at reserves that districts had on hand. We have fund balances. We have fund balance that we use in our budget every year. The only sizable reserves that we have are our capital reserve account. And we felt it would be prudent to get that money out of the capital reserve account and allocate it towards projects to make sure that that money was spoken for and tucked away in capital projects as opposed to sitting in the reserve account. So again, as I have stated, whether we actually move forward with these projects or not will remain to be seen. But at this point, we feel that, we had passed a resolution at the last board meeting to do the roof at Stockton. And we just feel like we should allocate funds towards projects that have been on our list to get done. We also have another issue going on right now, and that is the fact that we already know that we will have $2.3 million cut out of our budget from state aid, and we already know that we have allocated various projects in the buildings and grounds budget to deal with that. Our goal is to try not to affect our staffing. And so we had selected projects, and when I say projects, it's probably not the best word. We had selected maintenance items in the budget to put on hold for right now. So when we're talking about those kinds of things, we had talked about the refurbishment of Man and Kingston. We were going to do those projects similar to the Kilmer project that we did last year. But those really are maintenance projects. They're not capital projects because you're talking about paint, you're talking about flooring, you're talking about new furniture. You're not talking about making structural changes or moving walls or building on to things or changing out systems like HVAC and those types of things. So these really fall into the maintenance category. We have set funds aside for equipment, for some furniture that we were going to purchase, for some paving that we were going to do, and other projects like that that really fall in the maintenance category. We've set them aside right now, pending what happens in August, and when we finally land and know what effect not only the lack of state aid, but also potentially issues with tax collection could have on our budget. So we've set aside about $3.9 million worth of projects that we know we can carve out. We haven't cut them out of the budget at this point because we have not been asked by the state to do anything formal as of yet. And our philosophy right now is that we'll hold on to that until we have to make formal changes. If we don't have to make formal changes, we will set those projects aside. If in the spring we take a look at things and things are in better shape than we anticipated, we may have the opportunity to move ahead with some of those projects. But even if we had wanted to move ahead with perhaps the Man and the Kingston projects, we would have trouble getting the items that we needed right now. Factories have shut down, furniture is not being made, so there's practical reasons, not only from a financial standpoint, but from a, getting it done over the summer or what our time looks like that made us make the decision to postpone some of those projects. These are all things that we can add to the budget next year. Fortunately, hopefully, if we find ourselves in a better financial situation. They are things that, a lot of times we get to the end of the school year, we kind of see where we stand. We can add some of those projects back in if we feel that we have the funds to do that. So again, we're really talking about two separate issues here. And again, the projects that we are planning on doing this evening are just being set aside so that we can earmark funds towards those projects and protect them from potentially being looked at if the state comes in and looks at what kind of reserves we have.
It builds as well on the work of the Safety and Security Committee that met this year. The ad hoc committee of the board that met in the spring of 2019. And after the bond referendum failed, one of the recommendations was that a Safety and Security Committee be formed, which we did. We had a blue ribbon panel, that came down in October, did the presentation over at High School West, which can still be found on our website, to see what was said. One of the recommendations from the committee was to continue with the projects. Continue with the vestibule installation as well as the security suite overall, which is the cameras and swipe cards, which are monies that are there that will be completed this year. Talking about it, did other districts do vestibules cheaper? Or to answer that question, we really have to compare things that are the same. What else is involved and what's being done? How else were things constructed? Remember, one of the ideals for the vestibule is controlling access to the building. That's why that it's there. And again, in the current state of what we're dealing with in terms of the pandemic, it is a challenge for sure as we move forward. The responsibility to protect that money, again, we don't want to be in the situation where we were 10 years ago as a school district, where the state comes and determines that they're going to seize that money to go through. Expenditures with those monies require board approval, right? So should we be able to go forward with that? That requires board action, to take those steps. So,
The other thing I think we should point out is, we've done the fairly simple vestibule projects. We now are moving sort of into the next phase where it's more difficult because of various issues. For instance, when you walk into the main lobby right now, the main office is not necessarily right at the front there. If you walk into Barton, it's the same thing. The nurse's office is there, not the main office. And across the hallway in both buildings, you have entrances to the APRs. So there's different issues that we'll have to address. Also, there is HVAC, electrical, those types of things that will have to be addressed. And, we're putting canopies on the front. We're making sure it's ADA accessible. So it goes beyond just the scope of putting a vestibule on the front. It's reconfiguration of offices. Most of these offices literally have not been touched since the building was built. And then also making sure that there's canopies, there's handicapped access to the main entrance.
So before I open it up to my colleagues on the phone, I have a couple of questions. So there seems to be a perception that by moving forward with the vestibules, that we will not be able to be prepared for things that we might need for school to open. Right. My understanding, and I'd love for you to clarify, because I think it would be beneficial for the board members and for the people in the community, we can't use that money to buy masks or hand sanitizer, right, or to put towards things that are related to the back to school or back to work committees. I think that's an important piece for the community to understand that that money has very specific uses. Yes. I don't look at it, and this is just me personally, as an either or scenario. Moving forward with the vestibules does not mean that we won't have everything that we need for our children to be safe and healthy in the fall. I just would love some clarification on that.
Yeah, those type of expenditures come out of our general fund budget. We're talking about moving funds out of capital reserve account into the capital projects account. Right. So you're limited in what you can use those funds for. And as of right now, unless the state changes something, we are not permitted to use those funds for everyday expenses. So even that being said, there will still be some balances in the capital reserve account. If something were to change and we could use those monies, there still will be a balance in that account. But to say, $21 million on buses, there aren't enough buses that we could spend $21 million on, right, to accommodate, some of the things that they're talking about. So we've been planning. We just submitted our CARES application. We will be using that money. It's federal money that we will be receiving. We will be using that money. We're getting about $740,000. We will use it for technology. We will use it for cleaning supplies. We will use it for other things that we're anticipating we're going to need moving in. We will also be getting some reimbursement from the federal government in FEMA funds for things that we have already purchased in the past couple months. So we've also been just in the past couple of months planning for things, purchasing things, disinfectant, hand sanitizer, masks, all of those things we have as we've had the opportunity in preparation for September. I've started to purchase those items to be prepared for that. So it's on our radar. We are aware that there's things that we're going to need, especially when our committees put forth their recommendations, and we're anticipating that and we're prepared for that.
Right. And I just again personally want to reiterate something Dr. Malash mentioned, which is, we did convene the Safety and Security Committee, which was a direct ask of the community via the ad hoc committee. Yes. And that committee was well represented by people in the community that do this kind of stuff for a living. Yes. And in addition to all of the other things that we've already talked about, that, the police chief, the fire chief, the Department of Education have made these recommendations. Your experience as an administrator, all these things together, we've been talking about for a very long time. The vestibules have become kind of a lightning rod. Yes. In our community. I'm sure you would like nothing more than to never hear that word vestibule or security suite again, but yet here you keep putting it forth to the board because you believe in its value. Yes. In the safety and security of our children. And I happen to agree with that perspective because we've been talking about it for the 6 years that I've been on the board. This has been a long-term plan for a really long time. Yes. So,
Just like a remind, when we opened the vestibule at Barclay, remember we did the ribbon cutting, Chief Monahan was there. And Chief Monahan shared a few words and talked about that was the culmination of 5 years worth of work between the school district and the police department in collaboration for what do we need to do for our school district. Health, safety, and security are always going to be our primary responsibility. That's the primary focus of what we have to do. Security vestibules are as valuable to us in addressing a global pandemic as they are in addressing, and probably even more so, as they are in addressing an active shooter to go in. And yes, people are going to ask questions. People have their own perspective about what goes on and why we should do things. Why do we choose the ones that we choose? Because they are doable. We can make them happen, and they can work moving forward within a schedule to do. Would it be great to do all the middle schools first? That would be great. We can't do Carusi or Rosa until asbestos abatement is done in those buildings.
and we can't do asbestos abatement without bond money because it's an enormous amount of money.
Correct. It's like talking about doing one project before another project. We're not going to do whole scale replacing of parking lots before we do the work on the building that needs to be done. It would be like deciding we were going to sod the yard first before we had all the siding replaced on the house, or the roof replaced on the house. Right? There's no reason to spend the money to tear it all back out, to do it again. So that's why we go through. That's why we work with architects and engineers and the experts in the field. That's why we brought the experts from our community together. And again, we had the Blue Ribbon panel that was here in October. We had a very well represented committee in terms of the safety and security folks, that sat down with us, who were very articulate, very straightforward about what it means, and what we need to do moving forward. So.
All right.
So that's where we are.
Okay. Well, I'd like to turn it over to and let the other board members share their thoughts. I will start first with Mrs. Schultz, who chairs that committee.
Yeah, I don't really have any additional questions. Some of the questions I had, Lisa, you asked, or Mrs. Sugars has already addressed. So I would say thank you for kind of already addressing or asking some of the questions I was gonna ask.
Okay, great. So let me go over to Mrs. Neary. Do you have any questions?
Yes, thank you. Just a couple. Real quick, can the money from capital reserve ever be transferred back to the general fund?
It cannot be transferred back to the general fund. It can be transferred back to the capital reserve account.
Okay, so outlay can go back to capital reserve, but not reserve to general fund.
Correct.
Okay, that helps. And the general fund is where you pay out the regular maintenance items, correct?
Correct.
Yes.
Okay. And I guess my other question was the items in the long range facilities plan. Are those projects, are they all capital reserve type projects, or are they a bit of both maintenance and capital reserve projects?
The long range facility plan focuses more on capital project type projects. It does not focus as much on painting a room or replacing flooring or things of that nature.
Okay. And for guidance, because I think this will help the community and myself, when does something, like what qualifies something as a project versus general maintenance? Like we understand, all right, so it's painting is general maintenance, right? Some of the items, but at some point, does it ever cross over? Like what would be the guidelines or threshold?
So I would say, in my mind, I would say it's moving walls, it's reconfiguring a space, it's replacing a roof. But you could, if you were going to replace an HVAC system, I would consider that a project. If I was going to swap out a rooftop unit, I might consider that maintenance because you're just literally swapping out a rooftop unit. So I understand why there's some confusion about, what counts as what. But for me, it's really more reconfiguration, changing major systems, construction, moving walls, reconfiguring spaces, building new spaces, The work that we're doing at East right now with the wall work, to me, that, that's obviously a big capital project. If we were to replace a roof, if we were to do major, if we were to do, let's for example say in paving, if we were to mill and take out the old paving and replace the underground water pipes and those kinds of things, that's a capital project. If we just do an overlay, that's probably more of a maintenance. So it does, I can understand why there's some confusion on what exactly would qualify for which category.
Does the Department of Ed give guidance on that, or when it's submitted for approval to, say, the county, do they review that and never make a determination to say, no, this doesn't qualify?
So that most projects are submitted to the Department of Facilities, and they do, that's a good question. I don't know if you submitted a project that was like to replace a carpet, they would probably kick that back to you. They do have definitions. Each year we have to fill out certain documentation as part of our QSAC, our annual QSAC process, that talks about what maintenance is versus what capital projects are, and what we have in our long range facilities plan and what we have in our capital reserve account, and what are the amounts that we have to spend. There's a calculation that we have to do every year. We have to maintain a certain spending level for each of our buildings in terms of maintenance. And this goes back to, I would say the mid 2000s, when districts were financially strapped and were avoiding maintenance projects and using those funds for educational programs. And so now there's a requirement that you have to make sure that you're meeting a minimum standard in terms of maintenance. But that's a good question. I don't know the answer to that, Lori. If we submitted, a small project to the state, would they approve that or would they kick it back? I don't know. I don't know if they would or not.
Okay.
Mrs. Neary, did you have any other questions?
No, I think that covered it.
Okay, thank you. Move on to some of the other committee members from BNF. Mr. Avadia.
Yes, thank you. I do have a few questions. The first one is, the first one is actually more of a comment, is that I don't know if people at large realize how much trouble the state is in, but they're in a tremendous amount of trouble when it comes to financing schools. And as a matter of fact, there was a proposal at some point that must be dead, but to eliminate about 300 school districts because this is not sustainable. And as they look at opening up in fall, and as they look at fifth-year options for high schoolers, I'm not sure what the ripple effects were, but they want to spend more money with a lot less. So it's not insane to think they will look at open money in a Cherry Hill school district and say, let's deduct that from what they're giving. I think that's a very real concern. That was the first one. The second one is, this one is actually a question. There was good work, and I appreciate the work of the ad hoc committee around security. There was a blue ribbon panel. Both of them seem to come up, at least with the idea that we should be able to articulate the value of vestibules. And I guess, especially the committee from the community said, in a way that really makes the case to community members. And I think that's a good idea. In a lot of our discussions, we're really not talking about whether security vestibules are a good idea. These have been recommended all over. But it is, as Lisa says, a real lightning rod, right? Every time it's about, active shooter, this isn't maybe, that becomes, there are all sorts of things. But I'm just wondering, do we have a good strategy for a position paper that would probably include testimonials? After all, we have installed some of these vestibules. We've gotten some good feedback. Is there an attempt to collect some of that information? Because I think this is a discussion that will carry us through bond. That's question one. Question two is, what are the relative benefits for a bond funding a vestibule versus capital reserve funding a vestibule? Is there a different percentage back that we get from the state in those two eventualities? Question three is, are there big minority opinions in the security community nationally at the state level that say, security vestibules are really not the way to go? Have we considered those? I haven't heard any of them, so I'm imagining it's not a large opinion elsewhere, but I don't know. I think that's worth asking. Number 3 or 4 at this point, when we're thinking about vestibules, we sometimes for reasons of economies of scale, scope, getting more done at a school while we're already in there, we end up spending some more money. Would it be worth allocating more money to a single vestibule additionally versus 2? And sort of related to that, I know we've talked about lots of HVAC work being done in the event, is that somewhere we maybe should look? I am sensitive to the fact that we have to make a decision tonight, so I don't want to belabor it. Random idea, vestibules is sort of a lightning rod. Could we call them sweet spots? And would that pull better? I don't know. But anyway, any color you can give to those, I would appreciate.
So before Lynn, Mrs. Sugars or Dr. Malash answers, regarding your statement on the position paper and educating the community, I am 100% behind you on that. And that was actually also a recommendation of the Safety and Security Committee and is part of the ongoing work of the Strategic Planning Committee. We probably would have been farther down the line on that had COVID not stepped in and happened, but that you're right on the money with that one, Mr. Avadia, and that is definitely something that is being worked on. And then I'll let Mrs. Sugars or Dr. Malash take the rest of the questions.
John Cohen was the principal of Woodcrest. He was a member of our committee, and he was more than happy to, lead some of those discussions because he has certainly seen the benefits in his building. In terms of percentage of funding from the state, capital reserve, there's no funding from the state. Bond referendum, there's 40% funding from the state for eligible costs. So while capital reserve is easier in the sense that you don't have to go through a public vote, bond referendum, certainly there are advantages to doing vestibules through that. And that's sort of why we have taken the tactic that we have in doing some of the easier projects through capital reserve and then saving some of the bigger projects like Carusi or Rosa or Hart or Stockton for bond referendum money because we would be getting that 40% reimbursement back from the state. Allocating more to a single vestibule, I will tell you that although I asked our architect to turn around these numbers very quickly, I believe the estimates are fairly high to be on the safe side. We'd rather go high and come in lower than have the opposite. So I think that the estimates are fairly high. And in terms of HVAC work, there was a ton of HVAC work in the first bond referendum. And at this point, we have replaced boilers in our buildings, but we haven't replaced anything leading out from a boiler into the classrooms and into the offices in those areas. That's major, major work. That's not work that would be accomplished over a summer. And that's work that takes a lot of planning to get put together and to get put out to bid. So certainly that's much more of a bond referendum type of a project. And something that we would, hopefully, if, moving forward with the bond referendum is something that we can get done that way. Did I cover all?
Let me just follow up on one thing. That 40% left on the table, right? It's $800,000. Is there something we could generally put this to where that differential doesn't exist? In other words, where the state doesn't kick back anyway, so we're getting 100% versus 60-odd%.
The only option right now, unless there are ROD grants, which they have not funded ROD grants since 2013. So right now, your only option is you receive aid on your debt service, and your debt service is what you use to pay back your bonds. So your debt service is based on 40% of your eligible costs. So your only option to receive state aid is to do it through a debt mechanism and to receive the state debt service aid that you would use to pay back the bonds.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Avadia. Mrs. Matlack?
Thank you. I don't have any questions. I would just like to thank Mrs. Sugars and Dr. Malash for all of that information that was extremely helpful. And Mr. Ovadia, made an excellent point that the financial position of the state, and as I said at the last meeting, when we were also discussing this, that I think this is a fiscally responsible move on our part concerning the money that we have, and protecting ourselves moving forward. So thank you all for the information, and thank you to those before me who have asked the questions that I may have had, and I've gotten those answers. So thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Matlack. Ms. Friedel?
Yes. First I want to thank Dr. Malash and Mrs. Sugars for this dialogue and answering questions and providing information. Second, I want to say that I fully understand the concerns and the need to move money out of capital reserve so that we don't potentially have a replay of the taking of the funds. But I do have questions about the choice of more vestibules at just under $1 million a piece. We had a huge bond that did not pass, and I would have to believe that there were other projects that were in the long-range facility plan that we could be looking at that will benefit health, safety, and the educational experience of our students and of our staff. I also know that we have a long-running ADA compliance issue, and I'm just wondering if there are things on that list that would fall under approvable capital reserve projects, because as I said, I'm understanding more, thank you, Ms. Sugars, that, basic like repaving is a maintenance, but more in-depth makes it a project. So I'm wondering about that as well. I'm also not a facility person, but I'm interested in some cost-related issues. Are these two vestibules at Barton and Mann the same model that is going on at Beck, where they are masonry vestibules? And do we really need to spend extra money on masonry versus what has been put in at some of the other schools? I also am just curious as to the HVAC. It is truly a concern that I have as going into different classrooms, different schools, and different buildings. I have sat in rooms that have no air conditioning, and I'm concerned about the health and safety issues if, when the schools reopen, if it does reopen in person or a hybrid, are we prepared for our classrooms and our buildings to maintain comfortable temperatures?
So let me start with that issue there. I would say that probably 90% of our district is air conditioned. We have throughout the district a tremendous number of individual window units, which we have in this room here. Swapping those out when we need to replace those is not a huge it's not a huge deal to do that. Our focus over this summer has been to clean all of our units and to maintenance all of our HVAC systems that we have in place right now. So I know that our staff, our custodial and maintenance staff, has been spending a tremendous amount of time cleaning them, maintaining them, and making sure that they're functioning. So we have had a focused effort on that to make sure that when students and staff return in September, that they are functioning. There was another question about ADA. There's currently $500,000 slated in the capital reserve account to address ADA issues, and I am working with ERI to finalize their reports. They're going to develop a chart for us and help us prioritize which ADA issues we need to address. I also feel that it's most prudent to address those issues as we're doing some of these vestibule projects We will address some issues at BEC as part of the BEC vestibule project. We're going to bid that project with several alternates so that depending upon how far our money stretches, we'll be able to address various issues there. We're going to address some ADA issues at West. We just had a new, the main entrance is almost done, the vestibule is finished. And so we need to do some restriping of that parking lot area there to make sure that our handicapped accessible spots are closer to that main entrance. So I think approaching the ADA projects in conjunction with some of the other work we're doing makes most sense. And that, doing it that way, again, we will be working with ERI. They're finalizing their reports. We'll have a chart that will hopefully help us, kind of prioritize. But, again, it doesn't make sense to address an ADA issue that may be striping or curbing or something like that and not address the whole picture. So, again, we know that that's probably going to come as we're doing bigger projects, that curbing and asphalt, it doesn't make sense to put an overlay on top of asphalt that is falling apart just to accommodate ADA issues. It makes more sense to do the job right? To take up that asphalt, make sure it's done correctly and that all of the proper things are put in, and make sure we do it right. And so that may take some time and that will take more money, but I think, quite frankly, it makes more sense to do it the right way rather than to try to kind of band-aid something together to address those issues.
I think we're also looking at the dollars that are there in the capital reserve and what that looks like. Again, go back to the 2018 referendum. Included in that referendum, all of the all-purpose rooms at the elementary level would have been air conditioned. The cafeterias at High School East, the cafeteria at Beck, all would have been air conditioned. When you start to look at large scale units such as that, it just that, again, you're back to referendum size projects because of the volume of work that would have to be done. In terms of masonry work related to the vestibule work that takes place at Beck, the masonry work is there. Beck is, as all of our schools are masonry buildings. There is always going to be masonry work when any work involves either the interior or exterior of any of our schools.
I believe what Mrs. Rydell is referring to is the canopy.
So
the canopy is different. It's much more of a substantial structure than some of the canopies that we've been doing. And so, yes, right now that is factored into the two vestibules. We can talk about what that looks like after we see the back one. But, at back, I think it's important because of the issues of what door to go into and those kinds of things. Their feeling, in speaking with the architects, is that it lasts longer, it's more substantial, you don't have birds nesting in it, you don't have some of the issues that you may have with the current vestibules that we're doing, with the current, canopies that we're doing.
We ran into the issue over at Sharp where we had to replace the columns at
Right.
Sharp because of the damage to the steel.
Right.
And because of the moisture.
Right.
Ms. Rydell, did you have a follow-up?
I have one last question, and thank you, Ms. Sugars. That was exactly what I was trying to get to. So one of the public comments that we received talked about, I guess, building out vestibules. Have we looked at that and what the cost is of that versus what we are currently doing, pros and cons? And just one other comment, and then I'll be done. We talk a lot about the bonds, but I think we also need to be really conscious also that with COVID, there have been a lot of people who have lost their jobs, who have been furloughed, and who are struggling. So, we need to take that into consideration about bonds and how much and what the projects would be. So I just throw that out there. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Rydell. Mrs. Tong?
Yes, I do have a question. My question is about the, I think I had asked before about the breakdown of the cost of each of the building I was doing that we're working on. That's coming up, the Barton, the Man. We have the new architectural company that we are working with us now. Would they be able to give us the information before we vote on this? That's my main concern. I think everybody has addressed pretty much what I have in mind as well. But my point was, we have the new architectural company. Can we ask or work with them, see what is the best out to make this work and save money?
Well, it hasn't gone to.
Well, it hasn't gone to
bid,
design
right.
yet. So our current architect is the one that provided us with the estimates, and literally they turned it around in a week because of our timelines with board meetings. So it hasn't gone to design yet. And certainly we can work with them during the design process to see if there's areas where we can, do things a little differently. These are strictly estimates that we're using tonight just for the purpose of the resolution. And again, that kind of thing will come during the design process, where we can work with them on maybe cutting back on some things.
Right, that might be helpful. I mean, so we know what we put in the money, and like everybody had mentioned about the cost saving, the time, the money. Everybody's having issues now, so I think we should think twice on that matter. That's all I have to say.
Thank you, Mrs. Tong.
Thank you.
Mr. Goodwin?
I don't actually, I don't have any questions, but I did just want to reiterate something that Ms. Matlack mentioned, as well as Mr. Avadia. I really do think it is very prudent, and I appreciate administration looking to see if we can try to set aside as much money as possible so that it doesn't give a view of we have extra funds laying around, because whether actually carry through on the projects with the vestibule or need to reallocate it for something else, I definitely believe that if we can keep as much funds and have it, in a spot that hopefully will not be touched, that would be the most prudent thing, especially given the state of things is from the state perspective. So I definitely appreciate the work that Dr. Malash and Mrs. Sugars have done on trying to make sure we're in the best budget or best fiscal shape as possible.
Thank you, Mr. Goodwin. And Mrs. Arroyo? Mr. Arroyo, are you on mute?
Sorry about that.
That's okay.
I just some clarity, because I'm on information overload right now, which I appreciate very much. So thank you for all the info back to us. If just clarity on revisiting. So if we, what I'm understanding, and please correct me if I'm wrong, in order to save, to prevent any loss of funding or any loss of those dollars, we have to attach that move over to a line item, and if you've chosen the two vegetables, correct?
Well, what we're trying to do is protect those funds. So we're trying to get them out of the capital reserve account and into the capital projects. And yes, we have sought project numbers from the state and have assigned dollars to those two projects.
Okay, so but that can be revisited later. Like we can, before any move, so we'll have that discussion again to see if, our priorities shifted as a district, and, we want to move forward with this project instead, but using these dollars, instead of using it for this line item towards the vegetables, we'll use it towards this other item.
I don't expect us to be in the stage where we are making those decisions probably until the spring. I don't expect that we're going to approve this and suddenly jump into action and start designing these projects. I think that we probably will take a step back and see what unfolds in the coming months before we finalize any kind of moving forward with these projects. That includes the Stockton roof as well.
Okay, thank you. And did I understand correctly when you were saying that some of the ADA compliance needs, you'd be addressing those with some of the vegetable like construction and work, right? Like you would be including that in that cost?
Yes. That is correct.
And I'm assuming those two schools need a lot of ADA work, or will need it after the vegetables are completed?
I think man is probably the biggest issue because they have to step up to go into the building at the main, the handicapped entrance is not the main entrance right now. So that would need to be addressed. And what I recall of Barton, I think it probably just needs to be updated what they have there right now. It's probably not wide enough. The slope may not be exactly right. The handrails may not be necessarily at the correct height.
Okay. Okay, that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Arroyo. Okay, so thank you everybody for a great discussion. I had my second, so I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Sugars to open up for voting.
Lisa, can I ask one more question?
Sure.
Okay, so Ms. Sugars, do we have to make this decision tonight? Is because it's the end of the fiscal year?
Ideally, yes. Ideally, we should be getting them funds so that when they look at our June 30th balance, those funds are already allocated.
And in the spring, we can have another conversation to make sure that there aren't other projects that are more pressing before the construction begins.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I think the voting should be up on your screen.
Yes, voting is open right now.
Ms. Sugars, I need to change my vote.
Can you go in and do that?
I don't know. I don't see how I can do it.
Okay, how did you want to change it?
I was going to say you can. There's a change vote button up in the right corner. It's red with a little hand that says change vote. I've had to do it before, Kim. Thank you. Thank you. Yep, you're welcome.
Mrs. Sugars?
Yes.
Okay, I would like to vote no to 15.4.
Okay.
And, and 15.3. Hold on, let me look up 15.3. 1 second. Oh, I can't go back. Okay. X this out.
So Mrs. Tong, that was a no on 15.4.
Yeah.
Okay.
Everything else is good. Thank you.
Okay. All right, so we have a unanimous vote with the exception of Mrs. Tong on item 15.4. Is there anybody else that needs to change their vote?
I would like to do no on 15.4 also.
Okay. Anyone else? Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Now we will move into human resources. The superintendent recommends and I move the following. Number 1, termination of employment certificated. Number 2, termination of employment non-certificated. Number 3, appointments certificated. Number 4, appointments non-certificated. Number 5, contract renewals certificated. Number 6, leaves of absence certificated. Number 7, leaves of absence non-certificated. Number 8, assignment salary change certificated. Number 9, assignment salary change non-certificated. Number 10, other items, other compensation certificated. Number 11, other compensation non-certificated. Number 12, other motions. Number 13, approval of sidebar agreement. And we have, in addition, that is actually item, it says 16, but I believe it is
16.
16? Okay. Which is,
You just in that first paragraph.
sorry guys. There's an addition to 16.1, 16.3, 16.8, 16.9, 16.10, and 16.14. Mrs. Tong, do I have a second?
Yes.
Thank you. Let's go around the room for any discussion. Mrs. Arroyo.
No, I'm good, thank you.
Okay. Mr. Avadia.
None, thanks.
Mrs. Neary.
None, thank you.
Mr. Goodwin.
No questions for me. Thank you.
Mrs. Schultz.
No questions, thank you.
Mrs. Matlack.
No questions, thank you.
And Ms. Friedel.
No questions, thank you.
Okay, with that, Mrs. Sugars? Or do you have any?
I'm at after you.
Okay.
Okay, so I'm going to open the online voting. And we have a unanimous vote.
Great, thank you. Dr. Malash, I know you have a comment.
I do. Thank you, Mrs. Seidel. So one of the things that you approved tonight is very exciting for one member of our school district and disappointing for 12,000 or so of others who are here. But you approved Dr. Smith's resignation. A week ago, a little less than a week ago, Dr. Smith was approved as the next superintendent for the Evesham Public School District in Burlington County, New Jersey. So special congratulations to Dr. Smith. Dr. Smith was appointed assistant superintendent here in Cherry Hill during the summer of 2018. He actually began his tenure with us formally in that fall, I believe in October is when he actually started. So he's been back with us. It seems like, I'm sure for him, the last 19 months have been the longest 20 years of his professional career. He was a tremendous addition to the school district. Again, an individual who attended Thomas Paine, who attended Brainerd and graduated from High School West, but returned to Cherry Hill with an incredible amount of empathy, a great perspective and experience on education. And he's going to now go be the superintendent in Evesham, which is where he lives, where his children went to school, and giving back to his current community. So we will miss Justin. We know that he will continue to follow as we will follow him. We will continue to stay in touch. But I'm very grateful as superintendent for all of the work that he did within the Cherry Hill School District, especially during the time last year when I was out after my surgery. He was a tremendous partner, a tremendous asset, and truly a student advocate and an advocate for our staff, for our families, and for quality education here in Cherry Hill. So Dr. Smith will absolutely be missed, and we will look forward to seeing him again soon. He will be with us for the Committee of the Whole on July 14th. July 15th is formally his final day in the district. So we'll see him again on July 14th together.
Thank you. All right, after that sad news,
Yes.
we'll move into policy and legislation. The superintendent recommends, and I move the following. Number 1, second reading of policies. And that's all we have. So Mrs. Neary, can I have a second?
I second.
Great, thank you. Mrs. Arroyo, any questions?
No, thank you.
Okay. Mrs. Schultz?
No questions, thank you.
Ms. Friedel?
No questions, thank you.
Mrs. Matlack?
I have no questions, thank you.
Mr. Goodwin?
No questions. Thank you.
Mr. Avadia?
No questions, thanks.
And Mrs. Tong?
No questions, thank you, Lisa.
Okay, Mrs. Sugars?
All right, so we will open the online voting. And we have a unanimous vote.
Thank you. So I wanted to take a minute to see, need to have a discussion, much like you were talking about return to work and return to school. We need to have a discussion about return to in-person board meetings and what that looks like and potential solutions going forward. So it seems to make sense to have that under the policy and legislation area. So I guess I'll kick off the conversation and then I'll go around the room to my colleagues. So as you know, I've been coming to the in-person meetings from the beginning. We've been sitting socially distanced, 6 feet apart. I know on the screen it doesn't quite look 6 feet, but I promise you it has been measured. And I stay right in the middle, which is very uncomfortable because I'm in the middle of the table. But one of the things that I have been concerned about over the past couple weeks is we've had some technology glitches to the fault of no one. It's just what the new world that we're living in. We all, one day someone will have a slow internet connection at their house, which I personally experienced during a meeting last weekend, and which was incredibly frustrating. Some people have to call in, some people can't see the screen. So there's just a variety of technology concerns. Then in addition, we have a lot of very, intense isn't the right word, but we have a lot of important work to do over the next couple months that are going to require in-depth conversations. And I personally find it very difficult to facilitate good, natural flowing conversation by having to go around the horn to ask everybody if they have something to say. There's no opportunity for follow-up questions. There's no, you can't make eye contact to say, hey, I'd like to ask a follow-up question. So as a result, I had asked Dr. Malash and Paul to sort of explore what our options were for going forward. And of course, it would be at each person's discretion. However, I feel it's prudent to start to have those conversations as the rest of the world is starting to do. For those of you that are in an office environment, I know my company has started bringing people back. I'm back full-time in the office. So I really wanted us to have that discussion and have some options for some of these important discussions going forward so that we can have a natural dialogue where everybody feels like they were able to ask their questions, make their point, and that, we're not talking over each other, although we're not, because the discussions are being very directed and deliberate. But anyway, so I'd like to kick it off and I'll open the floor to Mrs. Neary and see what she has to say.
Thanks. So personally for me right now, especially with someone immunocompromised at home, I know places are starting to open back up, but I would be concerned, I guess, if there's options for a bigger space while the boardroom seems big, when all 9 of us are there 6 feet apart and in a horseshoe, that leaves me a little concerned. I know personally for me, for work, I'm not returning until 2021, but I know for some of what we do, that's not possible. But I think we need to vet bigger location for that. The public would still be remote for our meetings at that point. And then the requirements, do we need to sit there the whole time in a mask? And then if we don't, we're then going to ask, is there a possibility of asking our students to do that? And then we're not going to. I have a little concern regarding messaging as well. So I think there's still a lot to be vetted and to see what everything looks like as we get closer to the end of summer as well.
Thank you. So, Ms. Schultz?
Yeah, I would agree with you, Lisa, that I think with understanding what's on our agenda and the conversations that we have and that we have to have, that personally, I would also agree. I think we've done a great job, but to go around to each board member and give each member one opportunity to speak, I think it might be challenging given the discussions that we're going to have coming up. I think it's a very personal decision that each board member should have to make, but if you are comfortable coming in, I guess I'm a little unclear on why it has to be all or nothing. If there are members who feel comfortable coming in, as the state is beginning to open, we're now, I think, at phase 2, we're now allowing for indoor dining up to 25%. Again, I think every board member has to be comfortable, but if you as a board member are comfortable coming in, sitting 6 feet apart, wearing a mask and taking it off to conduct board business, I guess I'm just confused as to why we can't be allowed as a member who feels comfortable. And if you are a board member who does not feel comfortable, we can continue to do virtual meetings. I just think that we can conduct business faster by having those in-person meetings. So I guess that's my personal opinion. And again, I don't understand why it has to be all or none. I don't think there's a guideline on how to do this. So I'm not sure, again, why we're trying to force it into a box. I think we have the flexibility to make it whatever we want to make it.
Thanks, Mrs. Schultz. And after everybody's had a chance to talk on the topic, I'm certainly going to ask for Dr. Malash and Mr. Green's input, because I, like you, don't understand why it would have to be one or the other either, and it couldn't be a hybrid, as we're sort of exploring in our back to school and back to work committees. So, okay.
Yeah, and
so,
I guess, Lisa, the only other thing I would add too is I think that there's a distinct difference between us as board members coming in to conduct business and what we would ask our students. I just think in my head, I make that very different distinction as well, like in my personal life and in my business life. But I do understand Ms. Neary's concern. But I guess, we're kind of coming in to conduct board business. So I kind of do, in my mind, view it very much as business and personal. So just add that.
Thank you. Mr. Avadia?
Yeah, just a couple thoughts. So first of all, I know that you've already agreed, Lisa, but I also agree with Ruth. I think it really should be board member to board member, because the reality is, right, I mean, yeah, people have stuff going on at home, people have different sensitivities. People are immunocompromised in different ways. And so, while I've had kind of office hours throughout this, I know that some people haven't been, and they want to know that 3-month sequestering has been for something. That's number one. Number two, I mean, right, we ask all of our students, and I agree that there's a different standard for sure, but we've asked everyone to learn and contribute and be part of classes and graduations and different things on the school level virtually. It has been difficult, I think, right? But it's also like there's an empathy piece to it. I think for me, as an example, I've been going to some of the NJSBA information sessions, and education is not my native language, and I've tried to learn that way. And I feel like, realistically, I think we had a great discussion tonight. Do I like the one time per subject sort of spotlight? Yeah, that's probably not the best. Do I feel like whether we're virtual or in person, we should tee up some of these really important conversations? I think we've all talked about how important they are and how broad-based they are. But getting those onto agendas, I think Committee of the Whole next month is just a great opportunity for some of those bigger discussions. But I think that has to be planned for versus it being an in-person versus virtual piece. So for me, like, I was thinking about starting to come in person next month. That's my tolerance level. But if it was all or nothing, I would keep them virtual as my gut. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Avadia. Mrs. Tong?
Oh, yes. Thank you for giving me the time. Lisa, I had to congratulate you doing a job sitting there and doing all this. I'm very comfortable at the virtual meeting, but I would like to be in person if everybody agrees to it. I think the best is to be safe. So that's my 2 cents. You did
Great.
Excellent job, and everybody else, Dr. Balash and Mrs. Sugar, excellent job on you guys.
Thank you, Mrs. Tong.
No problem.
Mr. Goodwin?
I guess I have a number of feelings about it. Number one, I guess my first and primary concern would be for my family. So, I don't know what would happen if I were to catch coronavirus. I'm hoping it wouldn't be that severe, but I just think of my family. I think of coming in contact with my mother-in-law on a regular basis. I just think of my family from that perspective. And so that, I guess I would lean toward continuing virtual. But if we were to come back, I would like to be creative in terms of how we set things up. I mean, I just wonder, could we have each have our own desk with plexiglass on either side so we can see each other and be in the same room, but at the same time, you know, in addition to being socially distanced, we also have some additional barriers to try to do all that we can to make sure everyone stays safe and we keep each other safe. So I definitely want to be, you know, want to think this through. I would prefer that we kind of think about what kind of things we can do to ensure, go overboard in trying to ensure safety while still having the same flexibility that we would have with the in-person meeting. But if I had to choose one or the other, at this point in time, I would still choose to be virtual. So those are my thoughts.
Thank you, Mr. Goodwin. Ms. Friedel?
Well, for me, I am working remote. All of my work meetings are remote. You know, I see the council is still remote. The state board, the New Jersey State Board of Education is doing remote. I just feel like we are not at a point to be meeting in person. I am concerned, you know, as things are opening up, are we going to start seeing increases? You know, look at Florida, look at Arizona, look at California, who have opened up. I think we're doing a really good job, but, you know, the beaches are open and, you know, people are going out, and as you go out, you see more and more people not using masks. So I feel like virtual is still the appropriate meeting venture. I think that Miss Neary, I liked her ideas, like finding a larger space if we had to come back. But I just feel like it's premature. And I guess the dialogue and the conversations, if it's hybrid, it's not going to really change, because 2 or 3 board members in the room, and, you know, or even 4 and 5, we're still going to have to do the going around the room to have the conversations.
Right. Thank you, Ms. Friedel. Ms. Arroyo?
I personally, I would not be ready to attend in person, and that's because my son has hereditary spherocytosis, and I can't risk more engagement out in the community just yet. But also respecting where everybody else is at. If there's a larger space, then I may consider right now. But I think the conversation should be more focused on if there's a concern about how we interact or how we engage each other in our conversations, and asking if any of us have questions or comments to any of the topics that we need to discuss. Maybe perhaps a conversation around structuring our meetings around that, so that we can each have more opportunities or a different way to express what our concerns or questions are throughout the meeting, instead of just moving fast-paced to in-person meetings. But again, that could also help for when we are in person and spaced apart, just kind of focus more on that structure of our meetings and how we engage each other in conversation. So there isn't anybody cutting anyone off or not being able to express themselves whenever there's a topic that's something that's really important that we need to go through.
Thank you, Mrs. Arroyo. And Mrs. Matlack.
Thank you, Mrs. Seidel. When you posed this to us in your memo, I reached out to our field service representative from the New Jersey School Boards Association, and and I asked, what the New Jersey School Board's recommendation and the state recommendation is on when boards should go back to in-person meetings. What are guidelines? What are their recommendations? since I did send this, everything that she sent to me, I sent it to you and Mrs. Neary, and asked you to forward that to the rest of the board. So they have it, I'm sure. And so I won't read it all, but she does say that with the district closed and all other meetings being conducted remotely, unless there is an issue of such emergent concern, there would seem to be no pressing reason to move to in-person. New Jersey School Boards is doing all of its training programs, including the Delegate Assembly and their annual workshop remotely, in order to ensure public health and safety for boards, district staff, and public and their safety. That is part of what she had sent to me. Looking at those things, she also mentioned that we can't know, who anybody goes home to, what anybody's personal situation is, and we, that's not our purview to ask that of anybody either. So, given some of the things that some of the other board members have said, and as much as I agree that in person would be much more ideal for a back and forth discussion, I don't feel we're at that point yet from a safety standpoint and from a standpoint of the state as well. As Mrs. Friedel mentioned, everything else is remote, and as our New Jersey School Board's representative pointed out, the district is still closed and district meetings are being held remotely. I'm not at that point yet where I feel we need to do something differently than what the recommendations are.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Malik. Mr. Green, do you want to weigh in?
Sure. Well, from a legal standpoint, because what's been discussed are all very important issues, but very few of them are actually technically legal. But let's go through some of the legal ones. Understanding that we are in somewhat uncharted territory in one sense, and in another sense we're not, because boards have for many years permitted remote participation by members selectively in certain circumstances. So here are the circumstances. I see no reason why we could not do a hybrid. I don't think it has to be all or nothing. We could certainly, and I think we would have to accommodate those members who might be uncomfortable about coming in at this point in terms of that, so that there would be a combination of remote and physical presence if it were done. I do think everyone would have to wear masks. That's part of the current requirements. That they would have to be 6 feet apart. They could be in individual desks. I know that Dr. Malash and Mrs. Sugars kind of laid that out in the conference room there, and that did work for the board members. There would be no room for the administrative team. They would have to be participating remotely. There would also be no room for the public. Next month, we will be permitted to have up to 100 people or 25% of a room's capacity in a room. Which raises questions of, if you're going to start doing in-person meetings, what do we do with the public? In my opinion, is you would be justified and permitted to keep the public's attendance virtual, as long as the public can observe your meeting electronically. That satisfies the Open Public Meetings Act. It would be very difficult, although it could be done, to find a location where you could sit spaced apart as board members and also permit a certain number of the public in. You would have to essentially count them as they came in and stop it when the room got to 100 people or 25% of capacity, whichever's less. So that raises a lot of fundamental logistical problems in terms of what that meeting would look like and how that would actually, if you think about it, be any more conducive to a discussion than an electronic meeting. However, a meeting in Malberg in that conference room certainly could lend itself more to discussions, as long as everyone's capable of wearing masks for the entire time. The air conditioner should be on full force, which will perhaps create a noise to be open to maintain airflow. Given those strictures, that is presumably a fairly low risk of exposure, but it's not zero. And so therefore each board member would have to exercise his or her discretion in terms of whether to attend physically or remotely. But yes, it could be done. None of our boards have done it yet, frankly. Everyone is doing what you're doing, which is starting to discuss it. And that is a serious discussion. I mean, if we are going back to school in September and we are starting to have students and staff in the buildings, then we need to, I think, start seriously about also whether we will have physical presence of board members. Of course, there is a difference. Students we can require and staff we can require to be in the building. Board members are volunteers. And of course, they have a right to choose, which mode they want to participate in. So those are the basic outlines from a legal standpoint. I'll be happy to answer more specific questions in terms of how we proceed. But it's really up to the board how it wants to move forward with this.
Paul,
Yes.
can I ask, this is Kim, may I ask a question? So if the air conditioning had to be on full force, as you said, and the public is viewing remotely, and people are wearing masks, would that violate their ability to hear us? And then the meeting, even though it's online, it would not be audible potentially.
I believe with adequate microphones, we would be able to set it up so that people could hear you. I think that could be done. And maybe it doesn't have to be full force, maybe medium force. The key is you have to have air flowing through the room. You don't want to have doors closed and air recirculating. As long as there's an air current moving out. Those are things we'd have to experiment with, but it certainly, I think, would be achievable.
Thank you.
Mr. Green, it's Ben. I have a question.
Sure.
Because this is evolving and will likely be a hybrid for some time, does it make sense to put in a policy, or is this of a nature where it can be adjusting over time? I know at one point we didn't see a reason to do virtual possibilities, and we've been under some kind of cover, but does it make sense to kind of take a look back at that?
I think it's probably wise. Strauss Esme has been working on this, and school boards has their model policy, which is based on the state guidance such as it is so far. Understanding that it's a moving target and what we adopt may have to get modified as we go along. But I think that's not a bad idea at all to have something that kind of spells this out. Can you do it without it? I believe you can do it without a policy. I don't think you absolutely have to have a policy. You have legal options under the statute and the regulations and state guidance. But a policy is never a bad idea to have to provide guidance for how you're going to operate.
Thanks.
So I guess, Paul, I'm not quite sure how to move forward with the conversation. I feel like I'm a little bit removed from the conversation because I've already been physically coming in for the meetings, and I'm comfortable with that, obviously, because I've been here. And I am comfortable with continuing to do that. So I don't feel like my opinion in this, I mean, clearly others have more of a concern, so I'm not really sure how to move forward. What I am worried about is not having the conversation at all and having no plan to return, because even though the world has changed significantly since we last talked about that, having a remote participation policy, I still don't believe that it is, the true spirit of what our role is to forever in the future stay going with remote meetings. So I feel like I want to have a path where, at a certain point when, we're able to get back to what was our standard. I understand that people will feel, comfortable or uncomfortable, and we'll have to make those individual decisions. But I guess, just to be very honest, what I'm concerned about is that 6-8 months from now, as the rest of the world is moving forward, everybody's like, oh, if this is really working out okay, I don't see a need to come back to in-person meetings. And personally, I'm not okay with that. So I'm not really clear on what our steps are.
Well, you don't have to make that decision now. I mean, that's the only decision now is, should we go back to having board members physically attending? And what I would suggest is we get a sense of the board, and it would be, I do think it would have to be hybrid. So are, enough board members comfortable essentially with resuming in-person meetings with the option to attend remotely. Yeah, I would suggest that we start off doing it at the Malberg Conference Room and that the public attend remotely as well. And if we're comfortable, if a majority of board members are comfortable with that scheme, then the question is when? When do we start? Are we going to start in July? Do we start in August? Do we start in September? And get a sense of the board of how we move forward in terms of that. I mean, I did hear some members express a willingness to come in and others indicate that they would prefer to be remote. And that would be fine because if we set this up that way, it would work that way. Some members raised good points in terms of how would that be that much different from what we're doing now if you have the hybrid, how is that going to help? I think the answer is it helps the people that are in the room at least to communicate directly, and maybe that also cuts down on the number of people that then have to participate remotely. So that may expedite the meetings a little bit in that sense, potentially. So that may help a little too. But I think we get a sense of the board of, how do we want to move forward at this point? Because the answer is very simple. I think it's either we continue this way for the time being, and that gets revisited every month because this is obviously a moving target and it's changing as we move along. Or do we start trying to bring the board members in who wish to come in and proceed on that basis?
Hey,
Hi, so
I just want to throw one thing out. I know that people have had mixed feelings about it, but what I've seen, at least at my company and other companies, is the setting of a target date when we and then a planning process that goes along with that.
Mm-hmm.
So I would like to suggest that we maybe set a target date of September, or we can make it sooner, but then that we do have a planning, even as a board, to talk about what's going to make us feel safe, what can we do to make it as safe as possible for all the board members, and come up with a thought out process and plan working with administration as opposed to just because the thought of, okay, we'll just sit 6 feet apart and wear masks, maybe that does it, but I'm thinking maybe we should think about it a little bit more and come up with a good plan, even if that ends up being the plan, but and a target date and when we want to start it.
Yeah, this is Ben. I totally agree with that. Maybe we could call it return to board committee. I'm just floating it out there as an option. But I do like that. I mean, I think I'd be remiss not to mention there might be an equity piece on the board member side if we do have some in, some out. In addition to, masks create a difference. So there's a couple things. I would tend to agree with Eric, maybe a target date, either August or September. I'm not hearing like a clamor of a majority want to come in for July. But I think it's an important discussion to have. I think it's a good time to really start it. And I agree with, Eric's methodology here.
This is Carol. I agree. I think a target date is a really good way to go about it. I think September is an excellent target date. That is the target date for when we're going to, hopefully open up our school buildings again. So it seems to make sense to, also have that as our target date to come back to in-person meetings. I think Eric and Ben have made great points. It gives us the opportunity to have these discussions and, decide in a very thoughtful way how we're going to do it so that everybody is comfortable and safe, and how best to also include the public in our process. So it sounds like a good way to go to me.
Yeah, I agree. A target date makes sense. Eric's completely right. This is how companies are doing it, how other institutions are looking at it, and we evaluate as we go, right? As things improve, hopefully that they improve out there and stay on the course that they're on, it makes it that much easier. And then it's just that, it's the target date, right? Because agreed, in person is much, much easier. But I certainly don't want to mandate, and I certainly don't want to tell people to do something I wouldn't do myself.
Right. Ms. Friedel, do you agree with the target date of September?
I do, and as we revisit it, as more data comes through, I think that's a good plan.
Okay, thank you. Mrs. Schultz?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with having a target date. I guess the only thought I have is, if, July being our committee of the whole meeting, I guess, Paul, my question is, if you are a board member who's comfortable, is there any reason why we couldn't attend in person? Because that's a meeting that has a lot of content. Like, I still agree that we can have a target date, but if you are a board member who's comfortable attending in person, is there any reason why we couldn't attend in person for the July committee of the whole meeting?
No, not as long as it could be set up, as long as you meet the requirements, then you certainly,
Yeah.
I think, could do that.
I mean, I guess that's my only question. I completely agree. I mean, I want to reiterate, I do think this is a very, very personal choice and people have to be comfortable and having a target date, but I guess I still would want to understand, like, if you were comfortable and you wanted to attend in person, the July meeting or even the August meeting, like, why would we consider that as being an option for members who would want to attend and work in parallel paths of creating that target date as well?
Yeah, I mean, the only question becomes, if you've got the board as a whole trying to come up with a unified solution, are you essentially short-circuiting that? But from a legal standpoint, as long as you can accommodate the requirements in the room, then people could attend if they wish to.
Sure. Okay. Yeah, I guess I'm just looking at it like a parallel path, but yeah, that's fine. But I also agree with having like a target date. I mean, of, coming back and, so I think it's just a good discussion in general to kind of start to have the discussion and kind of come up with formulate a plan. So thank you.
So Bruce, why don't I move forward with just seeing how the rest of the board members feel about the target date, and then we'll circle back around the room to get the board's feelings on, again, leaving it up to each individual. If somebody is comfortable and the room can be set up to accommodate, we'll see what the board's thoughts are on moving forward that, because I definitely don't want to undermine the spirit of what we're all trying to agree to here, but it is an individual, my personal opinion is it is an individual decision. So Rosie, are you okay with that target date of September 1st and mapping out our plans towards that target date?
Yeah, I agree with that.
Okay, and Mrs. Tong?
I'm fine. Thank you, Lisa.
Okay, I think I got everybody. Did I miss anybody? Okay, so I'm also in favor of the target date of September 1st. So it sounds like we all are on the same page there in terms of a target date. And just to be clear, that's the target date where we hope, our plan will be, that's a target date of when we return to in person, assuming the world around us cooperates with that target.
Correct.
And developing a plan as we go towards that date. Okay.
Agreed.
And then I guess the second question on the table is anyone opposed to any member who is comfortable coming and joining the meeting in person? Again, the three of us will at the very least be here because, first of all, somebody has to be to work the equipment. So I'll just go around. Lori, any concerns with people being able to make that individual decision between now and September?
No, I'm not going to mandate to someone either way. If they want to go in, that's their personal choice.
Okay. And Ruth, based on your last comment, I'm assuming that you're okay with that?
Yes, I am.
Okay. Mr. Avadia?
Yeah, no, I'm absolutely fine with it if someone feels comfortable. I do think, just from an equity perspective, there should probably be a second round while we are in that type of a hybrid in terms of going around. But yeah, it sounds good to me.
Okay. Mr. Goodwin?
Yes, I'm fine with that.
Okay. Mrs. Matlack?
I'm fine with that.
Okay. Ms. Friedel?
That's fine.
Mrs. Arroyo?
That's fine, but I also have a follow-up comment, if that's okay. I can wait until after you're done.
And then Mrs. Tong?
I am good.
Okay, and I am also okay with the personal decision to come in between now and August. And so, Mr. Arroyo, you had a follow-up question?
Just to see if we could follow up at some point on the points I made earlier when we first started talking about this, in regards to process and how we have the conversation still virtually, since we're still going to be in this mode for a little. So if we can address that at some point, I would appreciate it.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. I guess I don't really know what our options are. Paul, do you have any guidance there on better ways to facilitate a conversation remotely? Any suggestions from any of your boards that have had remote access participation in the past?
I haven't seen anything that's been, particularly, I would say, better. I mean, some boards, rather than going around, will simply ask the board members to raise their hands and calling them in order in which they raise their hands. That can be a little bit faster sometimes, but I think the way you're doing it is pretty orderly, but we can explore whether there are some other options. It's cumbersome. That's the problem. It's not as easy as being in person. There's no two ways about it. But we can certainly explore what those might be. I haven't seen anybody come up with a lot of great alternatives, frankly, because you're limited by the medium. There's only a couple of three or four ways to do it, basically, and you can try to expedite the process. But now, if Ms. Arroyo is concerned about maybe having more opportunity to speak, that certainly could be looked at also. Robert's rules talks about limits on time to speak and multiple opportunities. So those are all things we can talk to in terms of multiple turns to discuss items in terms of that.
Okay, so I'm assuming that much like we do for strategic planning, we can make this discussion sort of a standing item under P&L over the next couple months so that we can just keep moving forward and having discussions on the topic. Okay, is everybody okay with that?
Yeah.
Yeah, if I could just add one thing, it's Ben again. There's various technologies out there, right? Some of them are conducive to public pieces with presenter designations. I don't have a lot of experience with it. Rose or Mrs. Arroyo probably has more, but I think we should look at some of that, right? Teams is nice because it's secure in a sense, but there's other options out there that may be more conducive, like on the raising hand side of the house. So I just think maybe that could be something that, that maybe there'd be an administrative recommendation or something around that.
Thank you, Mr. Vadia. Okay, so does anybody have anything else on this topic? All right, thank you all for another great discussion. There are no items for strategic planning tonight. I know you wanted to talk a bit more about some of the committee work.
I do.
Some other items?
Just briefly. And then I do have this, Dr. Smith brought me back.
Did we ever vote?
We did vote. Yeah, we started the discussion after the vote.
Okay, perfect. All right, thanks.
All right, so over to.
Yes, thank you, Mrs. Seidel. So where we are is we are in the process of finalizing the goals from 2019, 2020 for the school district. I anticipate that those goals will be finalized by July the 14th. There's still some more work that has to be done. And then we will look to introduce goals for 2020, 2021 for the discussion. Probably a draft ideally at the committee of the whole meeting on July 14th, but for sure by July 28th for the meeting to go through, and plan for 2020, 2021. We'll be referencing and focusing on the 3 strategic planning goals that we adopted that the board adopted back in February of this year. And remember, one focuses on student wellness and talks about creating frameworks of learning and supports for all students to develop the skills needed for social and emotional wellness. One focuses on purpose and passion, talks about to develop highly engaging learner-centered experiences with an environment that promotes voice, choice, and passion for learning. And then connecting beyond our classrooms is the third one, to provide resources, opportunities, and experiences for our students to connect to the world beyond their classrooms and to become informed and empathetic agents of change in the world. We are already seeing examples and have continued to see examples this spring of things that our students and our staff members have done that embodies some of the work that goes on with these goals. We had the committee, the folks on June the 9th that presented to us from each one of the subcommittees that worked on the action steps. So that work will be included in the goal work that is done as well. So I gave an update in my comments earlier about the return to work and return to school committees, which also would fit underneath strategic planning. And I do have the student board reports. Dr. Smith brought them down for me. So if you are all right with that,
Sure.
I will do those. And I'll start with Cherry Hill High School West. Representatives are Nathan Kong and Alexander Turley. And this is the statement, or this is the report that was submitted. Academics. Students this year have overall reported positive learning experiences while studying at West. The student body generally feels as though staff care about their successes and learning. Their achievements are celebrated and help is readily available when a student wants it. Students reported they felt that their teachers were available to help them, whether they needed help with material or a personal matter. However, with the situation this spring, some students did report challenges with the format of learning. While students eventually grew to tolerate the situation, they do not resent the district's handling of the situation, as this is an unprecedented time. Students also commended the district's quick deployment of learner technology to ensure each student could learn from home. Athletic news. At the beginning of this year, our athletes enjoyed many victories and a great winter season. Team saw great success with our boys basketball team making it to the Group 3 sectional final. Athletes from many of the teams almost unanimously agree that the athletics at West have been integral to their happiness as students. Students say that they feel welcome and have many opportunities to get involved, especially since a freshman team is available for almost every sport. However, some students feel as if their team should be given the same notoriety as the more popular sports. The COVID-19 pandemic brought all athletics to a halt, but it has not stopped the West sports team's camaraderie. For instance, the girls lacrosse team has been doing Google Meet calls with one another to both stay fit through video workout sessions and to keep the team morale high for the upcoming year. The team also honored their graduating seniors with posters and gifts in drive-by fashion. The softball team has taken a more autonomous approach to their time. They have been engaging in Google Meet calls with one another to discuss their well-being at home as well as their home workouts. Performing arts news. This year, our performing arts department put on many wonderful concerts and shows during our winter season. We have enjoyed wonderful performances from the theater department, such as Matilda, the Winter Musical, Lois Lowry's The Giver, and Tales from South America is done in Lab Theater. We've been regaled with music at both the choral and instrumental winter concerts. Students are in agreement that the music and theater departments at West are both lively and welcoming. Students believe that they are encouraged to perform to the fullest extent of their capabilities and are praised for their performances. We are proud to boast such a lively performing arts department with many dedicated students. As peers push the envelope in performance, it encourages growth in the community and fosters a family-like feeling that is conducive to personal growth. Many students personally attest that the performing arts program has shaped their lives for the better. While our brilliant performers are certainly saddened by the lost opportunities this spring caused by the mandated school closure, they have managed to find solace in their time at home through virtual choirs and self-practice. As summer comes upon us, usually the a cappella groups would have auditioned students and began their first summer rehearsals. However, the process will be a bit different this year. In the meantime, the music and theater directors are thinking of ways to prepare for the upcoming year depending upon how the global situation changes. Plans for auditions this fall for the department are underway. Miscellaneous news. On June 16th, Cherry Hill High School West celebrated the graduation of the class of 2020. That day, in a virtual broadcast, students and families watched as the ceremony unfolded including speeches from peers and digital choral music. That day, faculty hand-delivered diplomas to students' homes. Plans for an additional class of 2020 recognition are currently being discussed. Congratulations to the class of 2020. Peer leaders. This year, the rising senior peer leaders are finding new and inventive ways to bond with one another through video calls and online activities. The peer leaders are also brainstorming ideas to help our incoming class of 2024 adjust to high school in the event that we will not be able to do so in the conventional way this upcoming year. Medical internships. Unfortunately, this upcoming academic year, the internship for prospective healthcare professionals with Virtual Hospital and the University of Pennsylvania Hospital has been canceled due to COVID-19 related concerns. We are truly sorry for those who are unable to partake in this opportunity. Student concerns. African American history and education. In light of recent events that have transpired in America, the students at High School West believe that there is a duty owed to the students by the district to educate students on cultural diversity and sensitivity, as well as the plight of African Americans, as well as other peoples of color. As high school students, they have been through the majority of their education in the Cherry Hill Public School System. They are now noticing the hole in their education where African American struggles are not taught, where cultural sensitivity is not taught. In these times, more than ever, students believe that there is a need for change in our curriculum to adapt to these changing times. The future generations will piggyback on the groundwork of education that is laid for them. We believe that if we can educate these students, we can contribute to change in the community for the better. So thank you to Nathan and Alexander from High School West.
Thank you.
From High School East, Naomi Berkatab and Aubrey Demarchian. Cherry Hill East Student Report, June 23rd, BOE Action Meeting, End of the School Year Update. The end of the school year went smoothly for many students considering the circumstances. The textbook drop-off, along with the final report cards, was well received by many students. Furthermore, students really enjoyed the virtual graduation, along with the gifts given to them and the dropping off the diplomas. Looking to next year, if social distancing is to continue, there are a few prominent concerns. The lack of uniformity was frustrating for many students, as many teachers didn't adhere to the grading system or submission rules that were outlined by Dr. Perry. It's very important to stress flexibility, as many teachers don't know student situations at home. And while that seemed to be communicated by Dr. Perry, this wasn't always implemented in practice. Additionally, since coronavirus has begun, many students have been working during typical school hours. If we are to return to a formal schedule from home next year, it's very important we communicate with local employers about following the labor laws pertaining to when a student can work. Many students struggle to get work done because of how many hours they were working and the times that they are working. Although guidance has done a great job of it thus far, I believe it's very important to continue stressing the available resource of the guidance department, and I encourage East to plan more virtual workshops pertaining to the college process, as many students won't get the opportunity to tour schools or meet with guidance counselors in person. African American history. After speaking to many students and staff within the district, and particularly at high school at Cherry Hill East, there's a clear need to reform the history classes/courses required to be inclusive to African American history. Many students and staff have experienced personal hardships due to their race in the form of macro and microaggressions, and we feel the only way to combat ignorance is through education. Furthermore, many students feel that the College Board curriculum in particular lacks inclusivity and inaccurately portrays American history. Additionally, Cherry Hill East and other schools should work to implement a stricter no tolerance policy when it comes to racial epithets and incidents, particularly on social media, as many people I've spoken to have felt that their concerns haven't necessarily been heard and people haven't been reprimanded properly. Overall, the lack of a strong African American and Hispanic presence in advanced courses, Hall of Fame, major clubs, and cum laude is concerning to many, and we should work to address that while purposefully keeping diversity in mind. Thank you to Naomi and Aubrey.
Thank you. Okay. So that brings us to our second public comment, where you can comment on any item. So again, we've asked for people to submit their comments in advance to lshugars@chclc.org. Mrs. Sugars, do you have any comments?
I do. Jen Nadio, 224 North Madison Avenue. The Cherry Hill community was notified by the superintendent in a board meeting that the district has created 2 opening school committees. Even though there's no state guidances yet, many districts have shared their preliminary ideas with district families and employees. Could you please share preliminary ideas and update on the 2 committees in Cherry Hill? Thank you. This is from Mindy Rosen. Anything new with plans for fixing the parking lots? Mindy Rosen, please correct me if I'm misunderstanding. You have money, you are putting it in capital reserves to hide it away so that it's not touched. You are protecting the money from the state, seeing you have money. If that is correct, that is outrageous. You just said that you were not doing parking lots, but you spent thousands having someone telling you the ADA concerns of parking lots. Why spend money on a report when Dr. Malash just said you were not doing parking lots? And Yanni Yaris, I want to express my appreciation to the middle school and high school teams for putting together amazing virtual graduations. It was great getting to watch all of them. In terms of the security suite, both Ilana and I had to visit Berkeley during the pandemic, and we were both very pleased with the utilization of the suite to facilitate our visit and limit contact. I appreciate the reutilization of space as part of a security suite construction process. Our buildings were designed for ages ago. Our current day concerns would have never thought of when these buildings were built. The number of district computers that were given out, has there been any funds allocated from the state via COVID-19 emergency funding to purchase more? Will there be another tech survey depending on what the state issues on reopening guidelines are? Will additional items for the HR action items be shared? Can't get pink sheets from home. Finally, my family and I wanted to express our personal appreciation to Dr. Smith. His leaving is a tremendous loss for our district, but a testament to his incredible talent as an education leader. That's it.
Thank you. Thank you, Mrs. Nadio, Mrs. Rosen, and Mr. Yaris for your comments. Dr. Malash, do you want to address any of those comments?
I can.
Or any comments from earlier, actually, too?
Yep. So I talked about the 2 opening of school committees earlier this evening. There will be additional information that we will post about those once I can formally share information with the board. First, we're working on, as I said, we're working on 3 plans. One is that all students return to school. One is that all students and staff work remotely. And one would be a hybrid of students being in school sometime and working remotely sometime. Those are based on, a lot of the guidance will be based on the information we received from the state and the Department of Education. Unfortunately, we don't have anything more concrete yet because we have not received any additional guidelines from the state. Everybody heard the discussion tonight about just the challenges, what it looks like to bring a board together in a room. We are facing that and addressing that with what it looks like in schools. There for sure is a threshold of what can be changed to accommodate for certain needs in schools based on space and number of people and all that kind of stuff to work, where it continues to be beneficial, but there is a threshold where it crosses over that it's more beneficial to do remote instruction. We continue to look at that. Hopefully we'll receive additional information from the state as they continue to promise. New Jersey is a little bit behind compared to other states on a reopening plan for schools. Camden County has continued to meet. We work through the county office, the superintendents throughout Camden County We've been meeting just about every other week in a call similar to this, where we're broadcasting the board meeting, and then we communicate in writing about what's happening, what our plans are. In terms of fixing parking lots, there are some projects that we talked about that we are holding off on depending upon what we are looking at money-wise. We are expecting Dr. or Mrs. Sugars talked about the ERI reports that we hope to have to be able to present to the board in July. We will look at those recommendations about what's to be done. When we talked about the money and yes, assigning money from capital reserve into the capital outlay, we do not want that money to be seized by the state of New Jersey as it was 10 years ago. When I talked about not doing parking lots first, Mrs. Sugars talked about redoing a parking lot, which would, as opposed to restriping and things like that are things that we can do. The actual milling of the parking lot, because of the cost and the work that would be involved, are not things that we are undertaking initially, especially because we know that there's additional work that needs to be done on the building. We wouldn't want to redo it and then have it be torn up or have it to tear it up in order to do piping, sanitary water, sewer, all that kind of stuff that would go along with it as well. It's a bigger piece than just not doing it. In terms of additional monies for technology, Mr. Sugars referred to earlier some of the federal monies that we've received, and I believe Mr. Sugars $500,000 of those federal dollars of the CARES funds, which is the application that we submitted on Friday the 19th. 500,000 of the little more than 700,000 we received will go towards technology. We distributed right around 2,000 Chromebooks, about 200 Wi-Fi hotspots, children and families. We collected those devices from graduating seniors only. Other children in the district will be allowed to keep those during the course of the summer, so they continue to access the additional information. Dr. Mahan and the Return to School Committee have provided a great number of resources that are available. We'll post that information. We've shared it, talked about it in a quick minute. Mrs. Wilson's pushed that information out. We'll continue to share that during the course of the summer in our postcards and quick minutes. From the earlier comments, there were a lot of comments about the vestibules. I'd like to echo Mr. Redfern, who's the president of CHEA. I'd like to congratulate the school district, honestly, the Board of Education, for their work and the CHEA membership for their work in finalizing a one-year deal. This is the second straight contract that has been settled prior to the existing one expiring. One being settled prior to a contract expiring has been unheard of in Cherry Hill, let alone two consecutive ones. And again, it is a testament to the collaborative work and to the mindset and perspective that the association and the board negotiating team went into this process with to come out. This is good for the community. This is good for the district. This is good for the staff. This is ultimately really good for our children because of what they will be able to continue to receive. So congratulations to the district and to CHEA for that work. Additional questions and comments about vestibules. Dr. Potowitz asked about the $5 million. That $5 million is allotted to work pre-referendum. Specific dollars about where that's going to go will still need approval that would come through. That has not, it could be architects, engineers, bond counsel. There's a whole list of different folks that could be allocated to. And if not all spent, then it would go back into, we move back into capital reserve.
Or to another project.
Or into another project.
Okay.
That's all.
Thank you. Okay, so that would then bring us to the end of our meeting. I'd like to make a motion to adjourn. Mrs. Neary, can I have a second?
I second.
Thank you. All in favor, say aye.
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 All opposed? Okay. Motion carries. Thank you, everybody. I know it's a late night. Thank you for hanging in there. Members of the public, thank you, board members, for great discussion, and thank you, administration. Have a great night.
All right, take
Night.
care.
The meeting is
You too.
adjourned.
Thanks, everybody.
Good night.
Thank you. Night.